Hello, welcome to 5D Fungus. Today, we're going to talk about fungus. That's right, we're going to talk about it. We're just going to give you an idea of what the fungal kingdom is all about. And if you watched my last video, you've already got that, all right? It is its own kingdom, all right? So the fungal kingdom outnumber the plant kingdom anywhere from 6 to 1. The number I've recently heard is 10 to 1 species of fungus to plants. Wild. It's huge, prolific, if you will. All right. And it's just amazing how little we know about it. All right. Just the general public, and then the scientific world is just learning new things all the time. The fungal industry is an awesome, exciting thing to be in because there's so much innovation. There's so much we're learning. And really, fungus is foundational. It's fundamental to life. Beneath any healthy functioning forest system, ecosystem is fungus, holding it down. They're the equilibrium of the world, all right? And you know, fungus seems to have so many of the answers to the problems and the issues facing us, all right? And so we're gonna just give you a little general overview in this talk so you can better understand what fungus is all about, all right? And so fungus as a kingdom is most closely related to the animal kingdom, us. And we're most closely related to the fungus kingdom. Kind of interesting, all right? It might not look like it, but when you start to get into it, you can see some of the similarities. One, they exhale CO2 just like we do, all right? They need like 2 compatible spores to essentially kind of mate to form a dikaryotic reproducing new being of the fungal kingdom. If you were to eat these mushrooms, they're high in protein, all right? Very similar to meat, and also they digest, all right? Very similar to us, right? The difference is somewhere along the lines, the animal kingdom decided to encapsulate their stomach and secrete enzymes and put food in there and digest that way. Where the fungus kingdom, they have their stomach essentially on the outside. They secrete enzymes into their food, into their substrate, and then consume into them. But we both digest essentially. Kind of cool. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of our similarities between us. Now I'm just going to talk about the life cycle so you can better understand fungus, all right? So you get kind of an idea of what all the parts are about. So we're going to start with mushrooms because that's probably what you're most familiar with. So these are blue oyster mushrooms. These are shiitake mushrooms. These are some dried reishi, some baby reishi. So just a few examples of mushrooms. Not all fungus has fruit bodies like mushrooms, but that's mostly what we're going to talk about is ones with fruit bodies. And so these mushrooms, like I just said, are the fruit. All right. So much like an apple or a mango, the fruit is there to pass on its seed, all right, to reproduce the species. That's essentially what mushrooms are doing, all right? So they come out, they're the reproductive organs of the fungal kingdom, releasing what's called spores, all right? You probably heard of spores too. You could compare them again to plants and think of them kind of like seeds, all right? So these spores are getting shot out of these mushrooms. You know, each mushroom has a different way to do it. So blue oyster, shiitake, they're gilled mushrooms. So they have a bunch of gills under there that essentially have things called basidiae that are literally shooting, all right, these spores out into the atmosphere. They're not just dropping, falling out. They're shooting out at super high G forces, launching them into the atmosphere, thousands to millions to billions to sometimes, if you have a polypore that lives for a long time, trillions of spores out into the environment. It's amazing. So these spores now are flying through the air, all right? They're super microscopic, so they float, and they hopefully land on compatible substrate. All different mushrooms or their mycelium grows on different substrate, right? Your normal butt mushroom grows on manure, whereas these grow on wood, all right? And so if it lands on a compatible substrate, it starts to grow and form what's called hyphy, which is single-celled little filaments that cruise through the substrate, and hopefully they find a compatible mate, all right? And so they're looking for not only another blue oyster spore, if it was blue oysters, but they're also looking for kind of, I mean, you could kind of think of them like gendered, right? Or like positive, negative. They're looking for a compatible another hyphy or spore, and then they will kind of fuse rather than making a new child or something. They kind of fuse together, form clamp connections, fuse, and now they're what's called dikaryotic, which means they are now have the ability to reproduce and form mushrooms themselves. And so this new stuff is also single cell filaments cruising through the substrate, and that, my friends, is called mycelium. Mycelium, mycelium, mycelium. Mycelium, you maybe have heard about it. It's amazing stuff. It is such amazing stuff. All right, this white, this is all mycelium. This kind of white-brown of the shiitake mycelium. This white is mycelium. It's amazing. It is amazing. It's essentially the vegetative body of fungus. So if you wanted to compare it to plants, the mycelium is the tree and the mushroom is the apple or the mango, right? And so obviously it looks very different than a tree. A lot of people compare it to roots. It's actually not roots, although you could I could see why people compare it because it kind of looks like roots. It's a bunch of single cell, it's like strands expanding in the environment, but it's actually the whole tree. It's the vegetative body. It's the brain, if you will. It's the lungs. It's the stomach. It's the vegetative body of fungus, all right? It's super awesome. It's really cool. I don't have the time to get into all the stuff about mycelium, but just know it's amazing. So that's what's consuming through the substrate, all right? So with these mushrooms, they're called saprophytic, and that means they're decomposing and they're consuming through the substrate. In this case, these are all eating sugarcane bagasso, spent sugarcane waste. This one over here is eating coffee grounds, all right? So this white is the mycelium. You can see the black of the coffee grounds, so it's consuming through the coffee grounds. Now, all of these are in the fruiting stage, right? And so once the mycelium consumes all the way through, it colonizes the substrate. So in a log, it's really obvious it consumes the whole log, or consumes to where it hits a boundary of another competitor, or maybe moves through that competitor. It hits the boundary of the available substrate. In these bags, in these blocks, it's pretty obvious. They consume everything, and then they get to make a decision. If conditions are right, they're going to fruit. All right. If conditions are not right, they might die back. They might form what's called sclerota. Sclerota is when the mycelium shape shifts into a multicellular mass. It's kind of like a rock. Some sclerota from some kinds of mycorrhizal fungus are called truffles. All right, so it kind of gives you an idea. And so those sclerota can help weather through like maybe a dry period or a freeze or something, and then they can, when conditions are right, reshape shift back into mycelium, or sometimes fruit right out of the sclerota. In the case of morels, you have to go through the sclerota phase, and all the mushrooms come out of that. And so, and then, then you got the mushroom, releases spores, and we're back in this big cycle. So kind of cool. Hopefully that's clear, and now you get an idea of the life cycle of fungus, right?